The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist. With your host, Dave Hondel.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stage Door Show tonight. I'm Dave Hondel. Tonight, I have the first of three guests on the show that are in the newly released romantic comedy entitled Townhouse Confidential, directed by one of our recent guests, Patrick Perez Vidari. One of the stars is with us now to tell us all about his work, not only in this movie, but also in the entertainment industry over the past several years. So welcome to the show, Lee Tyler.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Lee. Well, we can't thank you enough for being on the show. I know, Lee, you started out as you went to college basically for fine arts and University of Michigan, which is one of the best, fine arts programs out there. But when did you really want to start being an actor? I mean, before you went to college, when did that love for acting really, come about?
Oh, man. I can point it back to late 1999 at the Kalamazoo Civic Youth Theater of Southwest Michigan. I was lucky to grow up in that small city. It's like halfway between Detroit and Chicago. And that made it an easy tour stop for a lot of musicians and theater groups. So I grew up near downtown Kalamazoo. There was a lot of active professional theaters there and a lot of opportunities to get on stage. Yeah, I auditioned for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I was 12 and got myself involved.
That's awesome.
With a show where there was tons of like combat involved. I did a series of shows as a youth where it'd be like fantastical adventures like Treasure Island or the Narnia shows or Robin Hood, but there'd be fighting involved. Yeah. We all got trained in like sword fighting and stage combat. So I caught the bug pretty hard. Like between age 12 and 18, I just couldn't stop. So by the time it came around to like looking at colleges and deciding a major, it was like, well, I don't really enjoy doing anything else. So it's got to be this.
Were there certain movies or TV shows that you really liked and you said, really one day I want to do that?
Yeah. A wide range. I was always into the, sci-fi fantasy stuff like Star Wars or, The Matrix came out around then. And I always loved fantasy novels and kind of heightened things. But I also worked at a video store in high school and I would be drawn to some kind of more offbeat, weird things like David Lynch's Mulholland Drive or Requiem for a Dream and things that were a little bit above my age range. But, my draw as an actor was to these larger than life worlds, but also kind of the darker, dramatic worlds that I wasn't really living myself, but I thought it would be fun to be a part of that. So it really ran the gamut from all sides of the acting universe, really.
Well, then you're also a filmmaker and an editor as well. And, you've been doing that for several years. And I guess, did one kind of lead to the other? Were you interested in acting first? That kind of made you into a filmmaker, or were you a filmmaker first and then you decided to become an actor? What came first?
It's a great question. Yeah. Chicken or the egg. I had, in the 90s as a kid, I always had the VHS camcorder sitting around. So, as I got into acting, I also would pick that VHS recorder up and make little movies with my friends. So in a way, it was always tied. But, professionally, I definitely got into the acting first. Once I went to school for acting, I wasn't really shooting anything. It was only years later in New York. I'd probably been here. I moved out, started working in theater here in 2007, came out in 2009 full time. I'd say it wasn't until 2015 or so that I picked up like a proper DSLR and started to shoot stuff. But weirdly, I started with documentary. I was auditioning as an actor and doing a lot of theater, doing some little TV roles here and there. But when I chose to start creating my own stories as a filmmaker, it wasn't acting at all. Living in New York, there's so many real life stories all over the place all the time that I thought it'd be fun to just interview strangers. So I would just go down to Coney Island and like find the interesting performers or artists and ask them a bunch of questions. I put this experimental doc together called Stirrup over the course of like a year. It was sort of like an acting sabbatical, a little jaded with the industry. And I was just like, let's just do something totally different. And I spent a lot of time creating almost like a Humans of New York portrait of, different performers. I took it to a couple festivals. And then that's how I got into editing as like my day job. But yeah, in a weird way, it ended up rejuvenating my love for acting. It kind of just needed like a dose of creative energy that didn't rely on, people in power choosing me as someone special.
Yeah.
It can get to be a little much if you're not making your own stuff.
Yeah, true. And the other thing about editing, obviously you're doing acting now, of course. And as an editor, did that help you become a better actor, knowing, I guess, how things might be cut afterwards? I always ask that question because I think if you're a producer, editor, anything behind the scenes, I think it can only make you a better actor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I needed that dose of education in post-production for film because of my theater background. And I like a lot of theater artists have a similar problem where when you're used to running a play straight through, it can be hard to learn how to act for camera because it really is such a different job. And once I learned how to edit, I started with the docs and then I started doing more narrative things as an editor. And it made me more savvy on set as an actor because I understood not just what would be like extraneous behavior and movements, but like how to tell the story on more of a two-dimensional frame.
Right.
A lot of acting school and theater can get really cerebral. We have to spend a lot of time. It's like a lot more athletic, really having to live in the world of the character for an extended period, physically. And that's true for film, but the story is told on a totally different plane. And I think when I was working as an editor, I got much more in tune with just the visual image versus whatever was going on in my head as an actor. So editing was a huge boon as an actor. And I hope that continues.
Yeah. And a lot of people that go from theater to TV, back to theater and to film and so forth, it's I don't think some of our new listeners out there that are just getting into the art or into the craft, there's a difference in acting where you're in the theater, your space is so much bigger. And for TV or film, I mean, it's so much more, condensed, where every little expression is caught on that camera, where in theater, you have to create that expression so much bigger for the people in the back. So talk about that difference and how you can switch it on and off like that.
Yeah. Theater, you got to play to the back of the balcony, as they say. And that's really where my roots are. So I remember being in acting school and our camera coach having us just tell a story to the camera, like a true story, and didn't really give us a clue into what the point was. And then had us come back a week later and do a monologue. And then a week after that, edited the two together and was like, here's you talking normally, here's you acting. And it was brutally clear about how over the top and theatrical my acting was. And
Yeah.
Ever since then, it was like, wow, how do I get to that more natural place? Like, how do I pull it back? And I would always get in my own head about it. But I had a really good coach one day in New York. His name Bob Krakauer, and he's a name often dropped out here because he blows so many actors' minds. He just gave me a much clearer sense of what film is and how it is telling a story with pictures versus words.
Yeah.
A little oversimplified to say it like that, but with theater, you really just get to like follow the language, dig into your impulses, just lean in all the way. And if you do that on camera, it might feel great as an actor, but on the screen, it might just look like your head bobbing back and forth for a while. And I think learning how to paint a picture with just turning your head one way versus another and how that would, affect how the audience views it. It just blew my mind. It made me watch TV differently, watch film differently. And it's kind of a paradox because in theater, we're using our bodies a lot more, but in film, the small physical choices are more effective. And it's I don't know, it's just easy to say that theater is more physical than film. but the physical choices on film from a strategic point of view are more effective than they are on stage.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And, and that would also equate to auditions as well. It might differ how you audition for a part. If it's a theatrical role versus a TV or film role, you have to kind of get into that separate space before you even go in for the audition. Or am I overthinking that?
No, you're not. You're not. And actually the lessons of acting for camera now apply to theater actors too, because even for theater, you got to submit self-tapes sometimes. And, the pandemic leading to more Zoom auditions, I think has created even more of a need for actors to understand how to work the lens. We used to, maybe send in a self-tape on the first round, and then for the callback, you'd go in person. But now it's not necessarily like that. You might do all the callbacks without ever meeting someone in person. So, you don't necessarily get the chance to respond to someone's chemistry in the room, like the casting director or the director, writer. You don't really get to feel them out as a person all the time. You really just sometimes have to rely 100% on your ability to tell a story in a small box.
George Barrow is your character in Townhouse Confidential, and talk about that. Romantic comedies. I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't like a good romantic comedy. And so talk about that, your role in that new movie, and just really the dynamics of that whole project. Because I think, like I said, Patrick is an amazing director, and so talk about working with him and talk about your role in that film.
Well, it's funny. Patrick Perez-Vidauri, the director, and Rosalind Resnick, our writer and executive producer, they created the best opportunity I've had yet to blend both these worlds we're talking about. We basically got the green light to be as theatrical as possible. And I was freaked out because, all this training I'm talking about, all this learning I had to do as an adult about like learning how to act for camera, it kind of went out the window for Townhouse, because the story was supposed to be really heightened, almost to the point of cartoonishness. That was how we knew it would work. And Patrick really saw this opportunity to, give all these New York actors a chance to just like break all the rules, go 110%. And, I got to be honest, I was pretty nervous until I saw the final film. I was like, there's no way this is going to work, because I'm acting as though I'm playing to the balcony, but we're on a set. I'm like, this is not how it's supposed to be. I was having a blast. We were having fun, but I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if this is going to work. But it kind of did, because when all the actors go like that, then you get it. Then the audience is sitting there watching it, and they're like, oh, I see. This is on purpose. Like, this is camp. This is like rom-com times 1,000. And so, it was really the best chance I'd had yet to really like be a stage actor on camera.
And also living in New York as well. I'm sure that kind of helped, kind of get that New York vibe, because, I lived in New York for a lot of years as well. And, if there's somebody who's never lived there, I think visiting there is one thing, but living there's a whole different vibe. So I think did that help a little bit? Just kind of having the New York actors kind of, be able to kind of put that vibe across on the screen.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've encountered more than a few entitled trust fund babies that having to play one was not too hard. We got a lot of New York archetypes in there. The cartoonish mob bosses. We've got the kids working their butts off in the village, trying to pay rent, working at the bakery or the Equinox gym. And we don't necessarily cover all the bases of all the types of people that live in New York, but when it comes to the West Village, where the film is set, we got quite a few, and we shot it all there too. So the life of the city really surrounded us constantly. I mean, we had even like some of the electrics team intercepted an attempted robbery outside of set one day, and like this guy tried to steal a woman's phone, and she ran down the street saying, "This guy stole my phone." And suddenly, like, the best boy is out there, ambushing this thief, and the DP literally like threw a trash can at him. And it was like this poor thief was just thinking he was going to get off easy robbing someone's phone, but he didn't expect like a team of large, well-trained men used to working as a unit, intercepting him. So it was really like true New York from dawn till dusk.
The other thing I wanted to kind of cover is, as an actor, you obviously work long hours. I mean, being on set for sometimes, 14, 16 hours, whatever it is, when you're at the end of that shift and you're having to go on set and act the same as you did when you first got on, onto the scene there. How do you kind of psych yourself up, I guess, to get into that space, to be able to, be as fresh as you were in hour one? How does that work?
Gosh, this is a great question. I mean, staying hydrated is honestly probably number one. You can be snacking all day off of the craft services table and don't realize like 5 hours has gone by since you had a proper drink of water. With a feature, it's tough. It really is the challenge of, shooting the end of scene 3, a week before you shoot, the top of scene 4. And, we shot one of the romantic climaxes of the movie on my very first day. And I think it wasn't until the end of the shoot that I shot the scene that led up to that scene. And I think what I'll often do is just break down the script into really clear beats for myself. And I think the most important thing is just having a really clear handle on like where I'm coming from walking into the room and where I'm going, exiting the room before that. Because it's all going to be out of order, of course. And sometimes I'll have a word, like I'll write a word in the script, like an action word or something, or even like, phrase or a song, something to clue me into like where I was, so that the continuity makes sense, at least just for me emotionally.
Right.
That's for continuity. But yeah, in terms of like keeping the energy strong, just, not going crazy on the snacks, maybe choosing to read a book instead of talking to the crew. I love getting to know the crew, being friends with them, but you could spend 3 hours talking to like the wardrobe department and lose your voice.
Right.
Keeping it calm, keeping it hydrated, and then just having that script handy at all times is really what I need.
Yeah. We have a lot of listeners that, again, are young actors and so forth in either regional theater or community theater. So what kind of advice can you give from your history in the business? Or maybe something you wish you would have done differently, I guess, coming up yourself. So what kind of advice can you give somebody that's just getting started in the acting business?
I'd say keep your creative friends close. I really didn't have a sense of community or like a collaborative network until, I would say, 10 years after I graduated college. I was so excited to be here, so excited to impress like the people in power on all these productions and casting and agents to, consider me special and really go it alone and hustle and try to impress them. But in this day and age, it's more likely than not that the project that's going to take you to the next level is something you wrote with your friends anyway. And I'm lucky to have found that community now. And I had great friends in college, but I think I would have liked to shoot more of my own stuff earlier as an actor. Keep more in touch with my writer friends and just keep kind of a good sense of like, all right, if I needed to make a short film, who's my guy? Who's my person who's going to write this? Who's got the equipment? Who's good at like managing a set? Who can direct? Keep those people close, because making something yourself, you can find locations for free. Chances are you've got the equipment for free already. Maybe go in on hiring a sound technician. But I think just considering myself to be empowered enough to make it my own way, to make our own material. I wish I would have done that a little earlier, instead of thinking I had to, just talk to like, the top casting directors in the world. Yeah, maybe make your own story at the same time.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think one of the biggest drawbacks for people, they think that, because they don't have money, they can't make something worthwhile. And I think the big message is just go do it. If you have even the bare minimum, just, tell your story, however you want to do it. If you don't have a camcorder, then rent a stage for a night and have a screen, or, have something kind of, just act it out, I guess. The other thing is your legacy. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind when it's all said and done? What do you want people to think of you when they think of your name?
Oof, man, that's a question. That's one I honestly haven't even thought of much. That's a good one though. Gosh, legacy, man. Well, I'd certainly like to be thought of as a bit of a chameleon, bit of an acrobat. I'd like to be, here's what I'd like to leave behind: a reputation for being a good team player. Like, in the end, yeah, I would love to get famous, like being an actor on, the next huge TV show. But what it comes down to is the impression you're making alongside those crew members, those directors. Is he a fun person to work with? Is he going to take direction? Can he change his tactics in a scene, from take to take? I think I have developed a reputation for myself as someone who's a good listener, who doesn't take his work too precious, who's always willing to try something new. And if I were to, hope for someone to look back on my body of work someday and find something positive in it, I don't know, they won't be there on set with me when I was shooting it, but, hopefully they'll get a sense that, this was a guy who's able to, work as a member of a team. Because whether it's stage or screen, it's all about that community, that collaborative effort. And, if it's tense on set, you can kind of see it in the final product. But if you're having fun, it always makes for a better film.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good legacy. Lee Tyler, I can't thank you enough for being on the show tonight. Best of luck to you and all the others for Townhouse Confidential. I know we have a couple other interviews with some of your co-stars coming up as well. So thank you again. Best of luck to you and your anything you do. And you're always welcome on the show.
Hey, I really appreciate it, man. Yeah, we'll be streaming on January 31st. So give us a rent.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.